3, 2, 1.
Oh man, no, that's a cool question, man. It was weird. I never thought I would be a musician. I was kind of I did sports when I was younger. Kind of pursued like that, and played basketball, things like that. And like just kind of random segue into the music. I remember like at one point my dad had asked me, dude, where are you guys from?
We're from Canada, so yeah. So originally from
okay.
Newfoundland, so like East Coast Canada, pretty much Irish, English.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So not really familiar with, let's say stores and things like that here in the South, but my dad had taken me to this Latin store called Fiesta in Houston, right? And I distinctly remember he asked me if I wanted one of two things for a birthday gift, and it was either a CD player, I think, and a skateboard. And so I opted in for the skateboard. I was like, yo, I'm going to be so cool riding this skateboard, right? Little did I know this skateboard was one of those older, like 70s, 80s dog board, the Z boys and like the big fish boards
big
with
fish
like,
tail.
and this was already, it wasn't cool anymore in the zeitgeist of skateboarding. This was like the ugliest skateboard I could have asked for. But at the time, I just remember thinking, it's like, man, I'm going to be so cool. I'm going to have so many hot chicks. I'm 12 years old. I'm going to,
I love that. That's
and so, yeah. So like I started skateboarding, and it was a big passion of mine when I was growing up. And I just remember building a big sense of community for the first time doing that. It was kind of like when you do extreme sports, you've got to be pretty fearless. And like, if you really want to get good, you got to just push yourself to get better. And, I've seen, nowadays kids are just insane in extreme sports. You got these 10, 11, 12-year-old kids winning like gold medals at the Olympics and stuff. But back then it was just, for me, it was just like a fun thing to hang out with the friends and do something different. And then I remember that was kind of my segue into like the angsty years, starting to listen to like pop punk. I grew up listening to a lot of bands on like Drive Thru Records,
Nice.
Newfound Glory, Alistair, Phoenix TX, RX Bandits. I had a friend who I was in middle school with, and she would introduce me to a lot of stuff like that, ska, and then I got into more traditional punk like Operation Ivy and like Anti-Flag and things like that. And then I left my hometown. I grew up in Houston, and getting into music to me wasn't a plan. It was more reinventing myself to some degree. And it was weird. I didn't have the best intentions going into it, to be quite honest. I remember I started going to shows, and I've told this to friends before, but the whole intention was I saw these guys who were on stage and they were just being adored by girls. And like, I never really had like a relationship before, and I was never really that cool. I was kind of the loser kid. And I kind of correlated that. I was like, oh, that guy's on stage, so all I got to do is learn how to play guitar and get on stage, and then girls will like me, right? Like, that's the equation. That's what I'm missing.
It should theoretically work like that, but
theoretically, and it worked. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
yes.
I went from being this nobody kid growing up in Houston. I was in this kind of same neighborhood for a number of years, and when you're a kid, you kind of build a reputation around your persona. Like you either become the sports jock, and you kind of surround yourself with like-minded people, and you're cool and you're strong and you're debonair and suave, and you're just growing your facial hair in. But for me, I wasn't that fortunate, right? So when I moved towns, I became the cool kid, because I was like the new goth skater kid. And so like I started, hanging out with more of the goth skater, the pseudo popular kids. And it was cool. I was still kind of an outcast to some degree, but I started playing music. And at that point in time, I kind of, my musical taste kind of shifted. So I started listening to like metalcore when that started coming out, right? As I Lay Dying and Haste the Day and Still Remains and Killswitch Engage and all that stuff was really in the zeitgeist of like this new wave of metal. But you know, my earliest memory of music and being integrated with music from my family was like, I grew up on Motown.
Nice.
So I grew up on soul, Diana Ross, the Temptations, the Spinners. So, and then subsequently, eventually I got into things like Blue Oyster Cult and you know, your general rock fare and things like that. But yeah, no, music was pretty paramount in my life for a while, because it just kind of gave me an opportunity to dictate a new version of myself, or like kind of redefine what that looked like. So it was fun, and I did it for about 18, 19 years, something like that. Was semi-successful doing it. And it was a cool experience, you know, like when you're a creative person, nothing changes about being creative. It's just the medium you choose to use, you know? So yeah, music was cool. Skateboarding was cool. I got a girlfriend, you know, mission accomplished. Yeah, that's that part of the narrative, you know?
Life was good. Like, I was going to ask you too, like you got that, you played a guitar, you gravitated towards guitar. Tell me the story about your first guitar, and what was it, and what do you remember about first getting that first guitar?
Yeah, that's a cool story. You know, thanks for asking that, because I'm reliving all these things for the first time in a long time. So this is pretty cool. Thank you. I remember, you know, my stepdad had me start learning on this old 1970s Aria acoustic guitar, right?
Yeah.
And I remember how painful it was. Like, the strings were so tightly wound. They hadn't been changed in, God, like probably 2 decades.
Actually,
and so I'm learning how to play, you know, everything from AC/DC to Coheed and Cambria and all these bands I was really into at the time. And it's just like, it hurt so bad learning how to play on a guitar that just wasn't really designed for speed or playing anything like that. And I had this friend, Marcus, and we spent 3 months, and we would borrow my stepdad's lawnmowers, and we went door to door to door to door in the neighborhood, and just literally just told everybody, hey, we're going to cut your lawn for $20 a pop. And we did that for 3 months straight. I feel terrible because, like, I never refilled the gas tank in the, in the lawnmower. So, like, my stepdad had to just keep refilling it when he needed. He would get so mad. And so, like, we hustled and we grind that entire summer. You know, we were just sunburnt from head to toe, just being out there. Some people's lawns were, you know, they just super unkempt. So, you know, we would have to almost take like machetes and cut them down a little bit first before we can mow them. And I think we raised, between the two of us, somewhere around like $2,000.
Holy snap.
Yeah, I think we ended up splitting that money. And yeah, the first thing I did is I went to a pawn shop and I bought this little Fender 212 solid state amp, and I bought a PVT 60, which is pretty ubiquitous in like the old school, like late 70s guitar realm. And then the thing weighed, you know, it's notorious for weighing a ton of weight for being such a thin body guitar. And then I think I bought a hollow body, and it was interesting because, like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just, I'm gonna buy a guitar that speaks to me, I guess.
Yeah.
And they weren't designed for the metal music that I was like about to start playing. So, you know, I've got a hollow body guitar that won't stop feedbacking on stage. I've got this solid state amp. I shit you not, we would play these shows and I would have to put like a fan, you know, like one of those Honeywell fans on the back of my guitar amp, because it would overheat. And it would overheat and it would cut out in the middle of our sets. So, like, just randomly we'd be playing this like hardcore music. Back then people were doing, you know, slam dancing and hardcore dancing, and then like you would just hear my guitar just cut out, and it was just like,
just the crowd.
You know, whatever. I was 15 years old, so you can't blame me. But
hey,
too funny.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. First guitars, like, they're special, right? Like, we both play music, we play guitar and stuff like that. So I just wanted to hear that. Like, it's cool. Like, you always had that kind of creative, a little bit, that creative side, that creative passion as well, like musical to, you know what I mean? Like, you know, into what you're doing now is kind of considered artistic, you know what I mean? Like, you're always kind of creative, different stuff like that. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, super cool. So I was gonna say I always wanted the bass version of that guitar, so I don't know why, but every time I see it, man, I'm like, oh, I wish I could get my hands on that thing. It looks so mean when people are playing it. I don't know what it is. The pickups in it look different, and the thick whatever body that thing. It does weigh 3,000 pounds. That is a thing.
Yeah, man, it's heavy. I ended up, I sold that guitar years ago. I always regretted it because, they appreciated so much in value over the past, 30 years. And so I ended up hunting one down on Reverb.
Nice.
And it was crazy. A guitar I paid $150 for at that pawn shop at that time in mint condition. I ended up having to find another one that it was like $800, just to to get one that was in decent condition. And then I bought the bass version as well because I was like, well, why not? I'm just gonna have both of them,
Yeah.
But that's one thing that stays with you, like now I gave up music quite a while back, and I realized that some of those things were just nostalgic. So I ended up buying, some of the guitars I had sold over the years, not the same ones, obviously, but I was like, oh man, it'd be cool to just have it again. And, if I ever get back to it.
That is kind of the beauty of it too, is like you get a little older and things kind of change. Like, even if you just put it on the wall, kind of think it's just cool to have. Like your friends come over, you got a cool story to tell, you got something fun to, to look at, something fun to talk about, that kind of stuff. It was fun. And every now and then you throw it down and plug it in and see what happens.
For sure, man.
Do you still play?
Man, I was in, sometimes I play drums more than guitar now, like it's more of just a therapy session, I'll just, sit on my E-kit and rip for a while. I mean, when I say it was like super integrated into music, I really was, it was, the last band I was in, we were a 9-piece Motown band.
Oh, sick.
So yeah, it was so much different than what I had done in the past. And,
not
it kind of spurred, I kind of started a cover band for my first marriage. And when I was, doing that, I fell back in love with like playing Motown or listening to Motown and soul. So I was like, I told the guys who were in the cover band that, they were musicians I knew. I just said, hey, do you guys want to just kind of keep this thing going and, write some originals and like really get out there and see what we can do with it? Cause, I owned a recording studio at the time. And so like, I was like, look, I've got all the gear. We can record at my spot. We'll practice at the studio. We'll record the sessions. I'll produce everything. And so we did that for probably about 5 years, and we got relatively successful in doing it. And it just, if you've ever been in a band with 9 guys, it's not sustainable.
Yes, yes, I have.
Unless everybody is literally just following your lead, and like everybody wants to have a creative say, but they don't want to put in like the extra hours to make it happen. Everybody wants to delegate, but they don't know how to even do it themselves. So then they like don't know how to articulate like their grievances. So then you got a bunch of men in a fucking storage unit trying to like agree on some stupid chord progression. And like, it's just like, it just, that was fun in its regard, but man, it was the final straw where it just burnt me out. I'm like, man, I'm doing well in music, but I'm broke as hell and I'm tired of feeling that way.
Yeah, it's unfortunate too. Like that's the worst part about trying to be a musician. Like on top of the fact you have to deal with at least one other person, like you at some point, whether it's another musician or somebody in the business, whatever it is. But then when you get a bunch of people in the mix and egos kind of start to play into the whole thing, and you're trying to like, I find it really hard when someone is trying to push for, kind of like a professionalism, or they're trying to push it in a direction and everybody's got their input on that and it goes nowhere. Like, yeah, I get it, man. It's that is a struggle for sure.
Definitely.
So was there like a huge gap between, say, the end of your Motown band days into your your set design and your in the business you eventually went on to start?
Kind of. I think we played our last show in 2019. Yeah. So before the pandemic, I think we played like a wedding for a friend or something like that. And then I think we played one like unofficial, like farewell show type thing, which is kind of an abrupt end to the band. But, what ended up happening is I I got burnt out on kind of the division in the band. So like I ended up more pursuing my career, realizing it's like, man, I you know, being a musician has been great. It's definitely taught me a lot about like managing people. It's taught me a lot about, you know, just digging deep to like, you know, push myself to be better at, you know, my instrument, or like learn everything about the business aspect of being a musician. But it was one of those things where I knew at one point where we had all been divided on a pretty big opportunity, that I was like, man, I'm really just like constantly running in place with this whole situation. So I had kind of told my band at that time, I was like, look, I have this career opportunity with this company out of town that wants me to be a sales engineer for them. And in this time I had been working like AV related jobs, and nothing that was like as big as this opportunity I was about to have. And I just told my band, I was like, look, I'm going to step back as band leader / everything guy. I'm going to go pursue this career. If you guys want this to happen, you know, you make it happen. I'm kind of over it now. And, you know, it just kind of just like started to degrade over time as far as like the quality of the shows and all that stuff. So, so like the end of the band was about right before the pandemic. And then I launched my business like mid-pandemic, like it was like July or August of 2020. So it was like a year lapse, you know, since I had played music or something like that.
It must have been nice though to kind of be in a different headspace, to kind of let go of that, kind of trying to manage all these people and manage a band, to kind of just focus on, you know, your own ideas, right?
Yeah, no, it was interesting because, you know, my whole identity was built around music for a long time, and I just remember, you know, like herding cats all the time. Like, you know, I had this vision, I have this idea, and so it's like I didn't realize how much stress it was putting on my life. And I mean, it was putting stress on everything in my life, my relationships, my finances, my career opportunities. And so I ended up selling my studio. The first studio I built was just a music production studio I built in a storage unit. So I kind of constructed these like rooms within multiple storage units, you know, the roll up doors and all that stuff. And I just, you know, it was a different situation. I didn't know anything about construction at the time. So I just kind of like wanted something for myself that was cool. And I did it. And I just remember the moment I relinquished kind of the whole music aspect of my life, I just felt like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do with all this like energy I have built in? You know what I mean? Like the music was my like muse in terms of like giving myself an outlet to just keep being in kinetic energy all the time. But without the music, I realized, okay, you know, I didn't really have the opportunity to figure out what I was going to do next. The pandemic happened. And I had lost my job. So I was fortunate enough to where I sold that studio, which was like nothing. I didn't really sell it for much. I just really sold some of the things that were in it and kept all the equipment. And that caught me up a little bit financially. So it gave me this like breathing room to be like, okay, cool. Like I paid off some debt. I just got laid off from work, but I've got this like 4-month severance to figure out my next move. So to answer your question, yeah, it was weird how much of a weight it was off my shoulders, because I remember being a complete asshole to everybody who was in my path, right? Like, because you know, a lot of people see it for face value when you're a musician. They don't understand, you know, obviously there's the hours of practice, like that's all a given, right? Like to get good at your craft, you put in 1,000 or 10,000 hours, whatever it is. But you know, to be a creative in general, like you sacrifice a lot of your personal relationships because you have this idea of what the outcome is going to be for your band or for your artwork or, you know, whatever you're going to do. You're like, oh, if I just do this, I'm going to be famous, or my album's going to be heard, or we're going to be picked up by a label, or if we play this one other show, we're playing 3 or 4 times a week, you know, we have more opportunities in front of more people. And it's like, it's not the law of averages anymore. It's just, you're kind of spinning your wheels and you're not doing like effective things anymore. You're just doing quantity over quality. So, but it's easy to get into that mindset. And I just remember I was always focused on the quality of what we were doing. So like I wanted the album to sound great. I want to spend as much time like mixing this thing. I wanted the quality of the shows to be like worth it for us to play. Like the logo, the music videos, like all that stuff. I was like, dude, I don't want to do it unless it's going to serve us and get us ahead. Otherwise, we're just playing the same show to the same people over and over and over again. This is so dumb. But in doing so, I was relentless about everything. I'd be like, hey, they don't have a good PA system. I'm going to go buy this extravagant PA system and take it to the and my poor ex-wife, like, you know, she was a trooper. Like, she went through the whole trial by fire, like helping me carry the subwoofers, helping me carry all my equipment, running. She would run sound on the iPad for us because we had, you know, like a Behringer wireless mixer and all this stuff. Yeah. And people would go up to her and tell her the sound sounds like shit. And like, she's just trying to do her best to like, you know, help us get through the night. You know, and it's just one of those things. I would start getting frustrated with people not showing up on time, you know, people complaining about, oh my God, this is, you know, I'm tired. I'm just like, bro, if you knew, you know, the amount of stress that I'm going through to just to get on stage, right? Like my glory was just sitting there for however long the set was, but I'm still constantly thinking about the sound. I'm thinking about the monitoring levels, you know, and yeah, man, I was pretty relentless about doing it the right way to where anybody who got in my path, sometimes I'd just blow up and be like, you know, get the fuck out of my way. You know, it has to be done my way, blah, blah, blah. And to some degree, you know, it's very divisive, you know, obviously, but in other ways, like somebody kind of has to take that role of being the like very, you know, proactive person who's just kind of playing, you know, the bad guy all the time. Cause it's like, you know, it's easy to get very like comfortable in any situation in your life. So yeah, man, I appreciate the experiences, and it kind of helped me build a lot of mental fortitude. But in all reality, I'm kind of a workaholic. You know, people use that term very loosely, but you know, like it's very true for me. Like textbook definition of like workaholic, and it just is what it is, you know.
That's good. That's a good quality. And to be fair, like in a creative space, that's not normally the way it is. Kind of, you know, like you're the push guy, whereas everybody else is the pull guy, kind of thing. Like that's one thing I always found hard. Like I take it really serious when we're going to do it. So unless everybody else is taking it serious, why are we doing it? Like I feel you on that, but I feel like it translated obviously to what you're up to now. You know what I mean? Like you're very successful in what you're doing. Obviously you're working hard. Like it shows. Like, I mean, we've watched some podcasts and stuff like that that you were on and whatever. Even the way you speak, I mean, you're always busy. You're trying to take every opportunity coming your way or whatever. So like, do you feel, you know, kind of doing the trial by fire thing, being in the bands, kind of leading the bands and all that stuff, kind of gave you the confidence or at least the mindset to push forward with your business?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, you're spot on, man. It couldn't have been said better, because that's the way I attribute where I am with my business today. You know, I don't look at it as, oh, I wasted all this time doing this thing when I could have been building a business. Like I think they go hand in hand with, you know, just, I think it's really about, it's not just the work ethic. It's more or less, how do you overcome like certain challenges that feel unsurmountable? And then you get creative with the solution. You know what I mean? Like when you're in a band or you're doing anything that's, you know, you have to share a space with and agree with people, you kind of have to build like a social rapport with people in a way that you can give a little bit and then get some, and then give a little bit and then get some. And then over time, you kind of start to learn each other's strengths, and you start to learn where your deficiencies are and maybe where you could get better at stuff. And somebody who has some awareness in their kind of general life and aura, like those are the people who will excel, because they say, okay, cool, let me look at myself from a third person perspective and say, okay, like, am I the type of guy who can be a leader, or am I the type of person who thinks I know everything, but I never deliver on it because I'm just, you know, either lazy or incompetent or whatever it is. Like, so, you know, being in a band, although seeming trivial because it's just a creative space and it's playing music, whatever, is one of those things where like you do create these like these relationships where you kind of have to challenge yourself. You kind of have to challenge others. You kind of got to look deep and be like, man, like I said, I was an asshole. I get it. You know, like, you know, that's kind of a loose term for an all encompassing person who is hard to work with. But I also realized it's like without those type of that type of mindset, it would have just been a jam band, right? It would have just been us getting together and like, you know, whatever, playing some music. So when you apply that to business, the difference is like how you approach business acumen, right? Like you can't be abrasive, but you also have to learn how to set boundaries as well, right? And business is an interesting way to do that because we've been conditioned to think that the customer is always right, you know, but we don't necessarily do that in every aspect of our life, right? Like when you're in a band, the listener's not always right. The listener's just, their perception is subjective, right?
Right.
So when you approach business, you kind of have to approach it the same way, right? Like you're offering a service, unless you're selling, I don't know, a car or a bar of soap or something where somebody could say, yeah, this is poor quality. You know, you can run your business the way you want, and you can run it with whatever's in alignment with like how you are inherently, and then just kind of keep building on your strengths. And so that was something that was really funny to translate from being a musician and kind of like being the band leader to being a business owner and then having employees and you know, projects with, you know, again, like most of my clients are very well known, you know, people. You know, you're talking about Rogan, you're talking about Tom Segura, you know, I'm working with Kendra Scott right now, Mr. Ballen. I mean, you know, all these people are very well renowned and prolific in their respective verticals. But what I just, you know, one thing that people have said time and time again is like they're human just like the rest of us, right? And what I learned is like taking a very simple concept from when I was a musician, and it was like, what drove me as a musician? It was the excitement of the process. You know, we're writing the song, we're in a room together. It's really fun. You kind of feel somatically, and your body starts to like tingle when you hit that right chord, or someone makes an accent. You're like, wait, do that again. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how it is with clients. You know, a client's going to look at your work and they're going to interpret it for what they like, what they don't like, what excites them. But one thing I realized, it's like, if I'm excited going into a project with my clients, I've already won, because at the end of the day, the client, that's what you have to maintain the entire time. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like a band where if like you fuck up, you kick someone out and you're like, oh, we'll go find somebody else or blah, blah, blah. Like, you have to maintain a level of integrity and excitement in that in order to ensure that you have a relationship when things do go wrong, because things will go wrong in business all the time. But, you know, building a really good foundation with that client, it's just like building a good foundation with your band or your spouse or your friends. You know, it's just like you get more grace when you're transparent and vulnerable and you're like, hey, you know what, like, we're in this together. It's not just a transaction, you know, like let's do this thing, you know?
Have you ever had difficulties maybe separating the creative side and the business side, where kind of someone is maybe like, no, don't do that because of XYZ, you know what I mean? But you have a vision for something, but they can't, you know, come through with the money or whatever it is.
Yeah. I think there's a couple layers to that. I'd say that has happened plenty of times where, how do I express this eloquently? So you have different types of clients. You have the clients that I typically work with who are like, their time is more valuable than their money, right? Those clients are hiring me because they trust the vision, they trust what I'm going to bring to the table, and they don't typically challenge me and say, oh, are you sure you can do it that way? Or we need to cut corners because we have this, this, and this, right? But what I did learn is that the most valuable thing you can buy back is people's time. And so far be it for me to be the one to say, oh, no, you have to do it my way. But instead of framing it that way, instead of framing it as, I know better, I know what I'm doing, yada, yada, I express it in a way that makes the client feel like there's value there to make their life easier, right? So it's like, where do you want to put your headaches? Do you want to put it on the front end or the back end? Because if your first headache is budget, and you're worried about workflow and other things that like are going to be kind of all synonymous with like spending all this money anyways, then I say, look, we can make this process as easy as possible on the front end. It may cost a little bit more, but over time, if you extrapolate your headaches, it's going to cost a lot less.
Mm-hmm.
So it's reframing the conversation that serves the client and not really like taking a stronghold in me being an authority in the space. It's really just, and so to your point, yeah, I've had situations where ego has gotten in the way, right? And I realized it really quickly. One of my second client actually wasn't Hormozy. It was a guy named Matt out in Australia, and he wanted us to design a studio in Croatia for him. So first of all, if you've heard the story with Joe, like I didn't know, what the hell I was doing, to be honest. And now I've got a guy from Croatia like, hey, I need 3D renderings for this space that, I can't physically be in. And so this was like a hard learning lesson for me in terms of being present and listening and just kind of having this ego death. I realized we had this conversation with him, and for optics is a big thing in business, right? Like we want to look big and we want to look strong, and like we're a big established company. So for optics, I had all these people on the Zoom call, and they meant nothing. They meant something to me. Like they were people I was working to build my team, but like they didn't really drop a lot of value to the table for the client. But it felt good to have a team on camera. And so the client is asking me, hey, I want to do a studio like you did for Joe, but I want it to be an aquarium. I want it to be underwater. Wow. Yeah. So I see you shaking your head, right? So that was my first reaction, right? Like I'm right there with you. I told him, I was like, Matt, that just, it's not going to work. It's going to sound terrible in there. We can't run cabling. Where are we going to mount the lights to? Like there's going to be reflections everywhere. Right. It's just not a very good idea, and I'm voicing this. I don't remember, what I said verbatim, but it was along those lines. And I could feel the energy in the conversation shift, and I could see his face on this Zoom call just kind of go morose. And I saw the wheels kind of turning in his head, and he's like, okay, well, let me consider this conversation, and we'll talk again. Maybe we'll set up another call next week. And I laid in bed that night, and it was killing me. It was killing me because I thought I was big shit. I was like, oh, I'm this, like, I just did Rogan Studio. I've got to be a good sales guy, right? Like I got it. But I couldn't understand why this guy who was really excited about my work would not just dive right in and be like, yeah, let's do it. This guy knows everything he's talking about. And I sat there in bed, and I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, I did something wrong. What is it? And I had that aha moment. And I realized this guy was excited about the concept. What he wasn't excited about was me killing his dream. And so I set up a new call, and I we get on the Zoom call, and I led in with this. I said, Matt, I want to apologize. I realized that I didn't give you an opportunity to be excited about this or meet you there where you were. I think this is a really cool concept. I think there's a way to make this happen. We just need some time to make that happen for you. So just let me know what your thoughts are, and we'll figure this out, And right away he's like, cool, send the invoice to my accountant. Here's the email, and let's rock and roll. But again, that whole story is just to say, it's like, to your point, ego can get in the way when you're a creative. Ego can get in the way when you're like in business. It's a strong tool to get you far in life, but it's also a strong detriment. It'll set you back very far if you don't know how to listen and use it to your advantage. Because people demonize ego, right? You can't do great things without ego, right? It sets the precedent and like the ball rolling for like those great things you want, but you have to learn how to taper that. You have to learn how to work around other people's expectations. And so I just realized that in that moment, what I had to become was the guy who got excited, the guy who said it was possible, because everything else I did before that was possible. I had to figure it out, and not the guy who tried to show off all my knowledge and be like, no, I know better about lighting and sound and blah, blah, blah. Like, nobody gave a shit. Joe didn't give a shit. Like, these guys were just coming to me because they thought I could do cool shit, and I figured it out every time. And that was the biggest lesson I learned in business, was like, oh, just be excited. Don't let your ego get in the way.
It definitely doesn't hurt anything to be excited, right? I mean, it gets everyone kind of on the same level and gets everyone on the same page. And I think just, it's the positivity, right? It kind of keeps everything flowing,
right.
and you don't want to shut down creativity. You don't want to shut down someone's excitement. So it's good for you. Good on you for recognizing that too. And to, being someone who can take the lead there and kind of make things happen. So did it end up coming to fruition?
No.
Turns out you did know better, and the lighting was glaring on the background. You know what I mean?
No. Long story short, man, we started doing all these renderings for this client, and man, we could never hit the mark. It would change. Like, it'd be like, I like this. So we went from doing this extravagant underwater thing to literally an empty concrete room with a TV with a logo on it. And I'm just like, this is a far cry from what we signed up for.
Wow.
If you were happy with this from the beginning, why didn't we start there? And then I don't think they ever built it or did anything with it. But, whatever.
Oh, yeah, that's business. That's how it goes.
But yeah, I mean, I don't want you to repeat the whole story again and stuff like that. But it is interesting to me that you did work with Joe Rogan. I mean, you created his whole podcast studio and stuff like that. I'd like to know how, you got onto his radar and what those first initial kind of contact with his team or how did that go?
There wasn't really much to it, my friend was assigned to security detail. He knew that I had built a studio before, which was my recording studio and the storage unit. I met with Joe, and it was just it was kind of this very organic, very just laid back scenario. I was in the room with him again. Like I don't really spend a lot of time glorifying celebrities or really like following anybody. So, a lot of people were like calling me out when I was on the Dov's podcast, like, oh, this guy didn't know who Joe Rogan was. It's like, that's not what I said. So the syntax was, I only knew him from Fear Factor. I didn't know anything about, I don't follow MMA or UFC. I don't, I wasn't into podcasting. I don't really even listen to podcasts these days. So it's like, to me, that's the name rang when like I was like, oh, Fear Factor. It was ubiquitous in like the early 2000s with pop culture. So like that was the first thing that I remember hearing his name from. So yeah, so when we interacted the first time, it was he was asking me. It's a very chill vetting process. He's the type of individual who he keeps his circle tight, and he trusts the people he surrounds himself with. He's very good at sussing out people who are inauthentic and have, nefarious intent towards him and stuff. So, it was as simple as, hey, this dude builds studios. Okay, cool. Like, can you do this in this amount of time? And me just saying yes. And then from there, it was just like, that's where all hell broke loose, and I had to just get it done. So yeah, it wasn't, I think people dramatize and they like romanticize interactions with these people as if it's like this big grandiose, like, oh my God, like we fell in love and we have this honeymoon stage and we go like have dinner and like we're, there's all these teams involved and it's like fucking mad scientists behind. Like, it's like, nah, man, I just met with this guy. He asked me to do a job and I was like, cool, I can do it. And we did it. And it's really the narrative after that is where things got exciting. It wasn't the excitement of working with Joe as my first client again. Like I was like, oh, it's a celebrity. This is amazing. Like this is cool. Like it set a benchmark for me to do something great, but it wasn't the driving force. It could have been Joe whoever, and he could have been like, hey man, I want you to build a studio. Obviously money's no option. Just get it done. and I would have just done the exact same thing, you know? So with him, yeah, it was, I think I didn't know how much in the zeitgeist of pop culture he was. And so it wasn't until I had mentioned it to a couple of people who I asked to help me, where they were just like freaking out. I had a friend who I reached out to because I had a general question about something cable related or something that I was like racking my head with. And he's like, hey, you know, you're doing your own thing. And I was like, yeah, you know, I've got this new project with this client. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. So, you know, you're hanging TVs for people or whatever. I was like, no, man, I'm working with Rogan on building a studio. And I remember his response, I still have the message from him on Facebook, was like, why the hell would he hire you? And I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, bro, that cuts deep. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks for the support.
And I kind of rebutted with like, I sent him the screenshot of our interaction via email and, and text message. And he just like dropped his panties and was like, oh my God, Rogan. Blah, blah, blah. Like it always happens. Always like, I would love to meet him. And just like, okay, man, well, you know, I asked you a question. Can we get back to like my thing?
We're working here, man. We're working here.
Yeah, we're working here. And, but yeah, so it was kind of, it definitely threw me for a loop because I didn't expect how much notoriety I was going to get from just doing something that I needed to survive, right? I needed this job to survive. I needed to like start my company to survive, you know, like I didn't know it was going to open a can of worms and I was going to have to, you know, go through this trial by fire and, you know, it was months. Honestly, it wasn't the initial interaction. It was the subsequent stuff that like was wild for me, you know, getting stuff in the mail, getting, you know, I hate, you know, people send me like, not death threats, but they tell me like, go kill myself because I ruined the podcast with my Red Room, the first studio I did for Joe.
The Red Room. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, dude. I had people trying to sell, like they tried to send me weed in the mail. I would get all sorts of stuff mailed to me for Joe. And it was pretty wild to, you know, and then they would give me stuff. They'd be like, hey man, just for giving this to Joe. And like, I drop stuff off all the time and, you know, he doesn't keep any of that stuff.
Yeah.
He gets stuff every,
That's funny.
so yeah, it was a pretty, you know, retrospect, it was pretty wild experience, but I just kind of was like, I was locked in. I was like, I got 2.5 weeks to do this studio. I don't have time to be fanboying and, you know, whatever everybody expected. So
I don't even have materials yet. I have to get materials. Like,
yeah, I was like, I gotta get materials. I gotta figure out who the hell's gonna like help me. I was like, I barely know how to use a, you know, circular saw. Like, what the hell, you know? So it's like,
I think that's the best part of the story. Like you kind of didn't really know what you were up to. You didn't really know who Joe was. And I think that's what led you to it. Because I think if it was somebody who was a super fan, I don't think that offer would have slid across their plate. Because I mean, I don't know Joe, but it obviously he runs a tight ship. Like there's not many people in that circle, like you say. So I think that's part of the deal. I think that to a certain degree, you've kind of, I think the hard work, and you can give your opinion or whatever, but I think like the hard work, you know, the time spent kind of thing, whether you wanted it or not, that was kind of like what pushed the opportunity to you kind of thing. Like I'm working hard. I really want to get to here and I'm working hard. And I think something slid across your plate because you worked hard. Like, I think that's how it works. Like you hear similar stories a lot, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, it's, the way I kind of frame it now, it's, as much as people either hated or appreciated what I did, you know, for the studio or, you know, I mean, it's kind of, you got to step up to that challenge. And, you know, there's those guys on the couch who are, you know, mid-30s, early 40s, pot belly, you know, maybe working one of the trades, talking about their glory days all the time as a football player in high school, whatever. And those are the guys who are just like yelling at like these pro sports stars and like yelling at these Olympians and be like, oh, you fucking dropped the ball and you know, what an idiot I could. Well, and I'm just like thinking to myself, like, man, like those are the guys who are coming at me right now, right? Like Those are the guys who presented the same opportunity. What would they have done, right? Like what would their outcome be? You know, because I look back at it, and prior to working with Joe or any of this, I worked at WeWork, and WeWork, was valued at $47 billion at one point. It's all bullshit and inflated. But at that point in time, the mantra at working at WeWork was literally get shit done. It was written on the walls at these buildings. And so I would be flying from Vegas to Salt Lake City within like a couple of days to open new buildings, and I go to Miami and then New York, and like you're just working through the entire night to like get this stuff done. But up until that point, you're doing all this planning and like project management, and it's still chaos. Nothing ever goes the right way. And so I think the culmination of all the experiences I had in my life, all the jobs I worked, all the shit sandwiches I would eat, all this stuff that I did, like it did set the precedent that I was like maybe the right person to do it. But the unfortunate consequence of that is that, everybody's going to perceive me as this guy who didn't know what he was doing, blah, blah, blah. But like the fact of the matter is I still did it. I still figured it out. I still managed to make it work, and he was still happy at the end of the day. So knowing how a process typically works for construction like that, and like how much has to be done, like prerequisite, pulling permits and all these things, like I guarantee you, especially with the companies I've worked for in the past, they would have just said, no way, it's impossible. 2.5 weeks. No, we got to pull permits. We got to get the electrician scheduled. We got to, do plans for this whole thing. We don't know how to sound treat, any, like it would have been a process that he would not have been happy with in terms of like, I need it done now or yesterday. And yeah, so anybody who challenges me on that and says, hey, I hate what you did, or like it was stupid, it's ugly, it's like, yeah, those are the guys who sit on the couch yelling at fucking Stephen Curry, being like, oh, that could have been me. I'm like, nah, bro.
No,
it's not you. That's the problem.
Yeah, no, it's your, and give it up to your punk rock roots, your little, you know what I mean? Your DIY kind of vision, and sticking to it, and making something work, right? Like it's having a vision. Yeah. Putting it down, putting pen to paper, putting nails to wood, and making it happen, right? So it's good to see. It's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's crazy that was your first go. Like that's crazy. And I mean, not to say like just for Joe or like that kind of way, but just in general, like super sick, man. Like I don't know, like I don't know. Maybe I have more things to do with my time than yell at people on the internet, but send letters or whatever. But that's something I don't get. Like why hate on somebody? Obviously, the person who's paying the bills is happy. So, like, yeah. Why the hate? I don't understand any of that kind of stuff. But that's not me.
No, man,
people take it too personal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. People take it a little personal. So, what's going on now these days? So, like, Soundshed, of course. So, what are you guys up to these days? You've kind of been kind of incrementally, it seems like tacking on, growing a little. So like, what are you guys up to? What are you guys up to now? And kind of where do you see this going in the next, 3-5 years kind of thing?
Someone asked me that question recently, not on a podcast, but I think we were just having a general meeting, and I don't know.
Good answer.
I think that's the beautiful thing about it.
I like it.
I love that. I didn't know then. And it's not that I don't have a plan, right? It's not that I don't understand my business and how to generate leads and solidify clients and sales funnels. And it's more or less, there's something to be said about ambiguity, right? Like there's something to be said about being as malleable as possible, especially in an economy like we are today, right? A good example is like, let's talk about NFTs and Bitcoin. Yeah. You remember when that was like hot? That was the hot thing, man. And everybody's like, dude, this is going to be the thing. And some people made out very well. When I started my business, I met a lot of people who were in that space, in the venture capitalism, and a lot of people who were into NFTs. And every single one of them were like, dude, you got to invest now, man. You got all this extra liquidity. Just do it. And I remember just feeling weird. I was like, no. Like intuitively, something doesn't feel right. I don't feel like spending $100,000 on this little picture of a cat riding a banana or something. And I was just like, no, I think I need to focus on learning. I think I need to focus on really like diversifying my skill sets and what I do in my business. And that started serving us pretty well, because at the end of the day, you know, I think when you're a business person, you could easily get pigeonholed into your own idea of what your business is. And I think as a creative, you know, you don't want to be boxed in. And in some ways, you can leverage that in business and be like, okay, cool. What's the next plan for me? You can kind of just like listen to the universe and listen to your intuition and be like, oh, you know, I feel this way about something. You know, I remember we did a gym for Joe, and it was a massive facility. It was amazing. Learned a lot, made a lot of good connections with Rogue Fitness, Fuji mats, Salus saunas, you know, the Blue Cube, ice baths, and all this stuff. And so it was cool because, you know, like I said yes to other opportunities that I wasn't necessarily qualified for. But it was one of those things where, like, I just kind of said, hey, you know, like, I figured this out before. I'm going to go in this direction and see where it leads me. I'm just going to be relentless about getting it done. And it opened a lot more opportunities for us. So we ended up getting into, like, the gym space, and we built a gym for Ballen. We started doing, like, we've done a bunch of sauna builds recently. So I just worked with Desmond Bain of the Grizzlies. We drove out to Memphis and built this really big sauna for him. I just got back from Ohio with like a 2-room sauna for this big CEO out there. So we've kind of like diversified in a way that doesn't really make sense to building studios. But we also started doing full-scale construction, full-scale remodels. You know, it's not as sexy as working with celebrities to build their studios, but we're working with clients who see the quality of what we do and want to translate it to their needs. And so I think kind of all encompassing for me, I'm kind of just going where like the opportunity feels right nowadays. You know, we sunk a good amount of investment into our studio facility. So the one you see me in right now, we've got multiple rooms, but like a big transition for me has been wellness. And it was a big kind of change for my life about 1.5 years ago before I had my daughter. And it was one of those things where I realized how much it was kind of lacking in my life. So believe it or not, I'm 32 pounds lighter than I was 1.5 years ago, and feeling amazing at 37, and have a daughter, and just trying to, like, you know, go more in alignment with like what the universe is telling me. And a lot of times it's crazy because when you're running a business, they don't ever prepare you for like the low times. Like, people are like, oh, you're your own boss, and man, you must make all this money, and you can like afford to do this, and everybody looks at you and you just have this like status level that you start to climb if you're successful. I never looked at it that way because I was never driven by the money or the status or the success. I like to own my own destiny. But one thing I realized is, like, you don't always get to choose that. And in business, if you can accept both avenues, if you can accept the fact that like you do have a lot of control over how you spend your money, how you treat your employees, how you become a leader, how you show up, like that stuff's very important, because if you don't have that, then the rest of the stuff doesn't fall into place. And I think a lot of business owners fall into this like scarcity mindset, where if they don't have the clients they want, if they don't have enough clients, they don't know that there's a huge power in the word no. And it's like, what makes you successful are the things that you actually walk away from, not the things that you actually take on. And so I've kind of learned that more and more as I've been building this business going to year 5. You know, we built this studio space. We have a lot of people using it for recording, you know, Dr. Drew, comedian Brian Simpson, Emily Fletcher, you know, all these different verticals are coming in to record with us because of the nature of what we do. But it makes it interesting because I can get a call tomorrow and be like, hey, we did a sauna build for Dana White and the UFC facility, which was really cool. So drove out to Vegas for, you know, 1.5 weeks and built this really cool custom sauna for them. And yeah, so the more opportunities I kind of say yes to, the more we get to just do these incredible things with incredible people. And it's not just about, you know, who they are and you know, pop culture and status. It's just, these are people who appreciate what we do, and they're willing to pay us like the value of what we do rather than us kind of like scrounging for scraps and being like, oh, let's just go get whatever client we can and, you know, we'll make it work. So, so yeah, I think the future is cool because like, I don't have to determine that right now. We just do what works. We lead with integrity and just make sure we get it done and just do the quality of work we always do. And it doesn't matter what we're building or designing or, you know, I mean, it's just fun. You know, it's a lot of fun, and it feels like I'm actually doing something that's going to like be fulfilling for a very long time, you know? So
I think you got it perfectly in order. Like, I mean, the quality of craftsmanship comes first, right? Like you said, that's your number one goal. And then everything else kind of falls into place. Like the celebrity thing is awesome, but it's your quality of work is what they're going to tell their buddies about and what they're going to tell their friends about, right? It's the quality of like, look how fucking awesome this sonnet is. Like that's what's going to propel it and open up new doors to, you know, that you can say yes to. And it's good that you can just, you know, let the ego go and just, you know, whatever doors come by, you're willing to step through there and you know, let the quality of your work shine.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. But Matt, we'll leave it there, man. On that was awesome, man. We really appreciate your time. Because we don't want to keep you any longer. You probably got to go start another studio right now. So
I'm literally, I'm after this. Like, we got to go finish this other studio. So I'm like, 16 hours, man. 16 hours a day, no lie. Yeah, if you guys are ever here in Texas, I know it's, you know, a little bit of a bus ride down here, but if you do manage to get down here, you know, just come tour the facility. You know, come check it out. You know, I don't need to plug anything. I just want to extend that invite to you guys and,
really appreciate
you know, come be my guest here, you know?
That'd be awesome.
That would be awesome. And definitely trying to make my way down there. I want to get to the mothership, and I just like to get down to Texas and see what it's all about. It seems, we're kind of in cattle country up where we are right here. It's kind of like, we're in Alberta, so we're very Canadian Texas-ish.
It's got and I think my father-in-law is going to move there. Actually,
Vancouver Island in Vancouver. Where is that in relation to Alberta?
Next guy over kind of thing. Like, so next province over. It's not that far really. Like Vancouver, or not Vancouver, but BC's border is only an hour and a half away or something like that. An hour and 45 minutes. So not that far. But like nice. Vancouver's a nice distance, but it's not that far from BC technically. Mountain range kind of thing is around the corner. Like I say, really enjoy your work, and especially as, you know, kind of we're in that space as an audio engineer, really love what you guys are doing. I think the business idea is cool. The work you do is cool. So yeah, man, really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, guys.
Awesome, dude.
All right, man.
Thank you
Thanks
so
a lot.
much.